Hello, and welcome. Come, find a comfortable place, perhaps somewhere soft, where you can sink down, letting the weight of the day drift off your shoulders like silt settling on the ocean floor. Close your eyes, imagine the sound of water, not the crashing, violent waves of the storm, but the deep, rhythmic thrum of the ocean, the pressure, the silence, the absolute, crushing darkness where the sun has never touched, and where time flows as sluggishly as a deep-sea current. Tonight, we are going to descend. We are going past the coral reefs, teeming with colorful life. We are going past the continental shelves, where the light turns to a twilight blue. We are going down into the midnight zone and further still, into the abyssal trenches. We are going to speak of things that were here before the mountains were raised, before the first dragon drew breath, and before the first prayer was ever whispered to a god. We are going to speak of the Aboleths and the Krakens, the lords of the deep. To understand the Aboleth, you must first understand the concept of memory. For you and me, memory is a fleeting thing. It fades, it frays at the edges. You might remember the warmth of the sun on your skin from a childhood summer, but you likely cannot recall the specific day, or the exact temperature, or the thoughts running through your head at that precise moment. We are creatures of the present, constantly shedding our past to make room for the future. The Aboleth is not like us. For an Aboleth, memory is not a record. It is a state of being. They do not remember their ancestors. They are their ancestors. When an Aboleth is born, though born is perhaps the wrong word for a creature that knits itself together from the darkness, it inherits the complete, perfect memory of the parent, and that parent possessed the memories of its parent. This chain remains unbroken, stretching back through eons, back through eras we have no names for, back to the very moment their race came into existence. They remember the taste of the primordial soup. They remember the silence of a world without birds. They remember when the gods were intruders. This is the foundation of their psychology and their horror. They are the living archives of a time before morality, before light, and before hope. Let us look at their origins. While the exact cosmology can shift, depending on which crystal sphere or plane of existence you inhabit, the Aboleths themselves are remarkably consistent in their own history. They claim to be the oldest sentient race in the multiverse. Now, dragons will dispute this, claiming they were born of the falling blood of Io. The giants will claim the All-Father created them to order the world, but the Aboleths simply wait, floating in the dark, knowing that they were here when those progenitor gods were merely stray thoughts in the cosmos. The most prominent lore, supported by texts found in the sunken libraries of the lost city of Puentifu, and whispered by warlocks who have stared too long into the far realm, suggests that the Aboleths did not originate on the material plane, nor did they come from the elemental planes. They are beings of the far realm, or perhaps a reality adjacent to it, a place where physics acts more like a suggestion, and where madness is gravity. However, unlike other aberrations that seek to consume or destroy reality, the Aboleths came to the material plane to rule it. They are not chaotic destroyers like the Slud. They are tyrants. They are creatures of absolute order. But it is an alien order. It is the order of the master and the slave. In the earliest days, often referred to in deep lore as the Epoch of Slime or the Age of Sign, the Aboleths arrived. Canonically, we look to the entity known as Piscaethsis, the Blood Queen. She is arguably the deity of the Aboleth, though they do not worship her in the way a cleric worships Lathander or Moradin. Aboleths are fundamentally atheistic in practice. They do not pray because they do not believe any being is superior to themselves. They acknowledge Piskiths as a progenitor, a massive swimming horror from the far realm whose blood, spilling into the currents of the multiverse, created the first Aboleths. Imagine this entity, Piskiths, traveling through the void between worlds. She does not have a shape that the human mind can comfortably hold. She is vast, tentacled, slimy, and her very presence warps the reality around her as she traveled. Droplets of her vitality, her mucus, and her blood drifted off into the primeval oceans of the young worlds. Each droplet grew. Each droplet became a mind. And because they all sprang from the same source, and because they all possess that perfect genetic memory, every Aboleth remembers being Piskiths. They remember the travel through the void. This gives them a unified sense of superiority that is impossible to shatter. They know they are the true inheritors of the cosmos because they are the blood of the thing that traveled between the stars before the stars had names. When they arrived in the oceans of the material plane, specifically the world that would become Toril or Orth or Eberron, they found it empty of higher thought. There were elemental chaotic forces, yes. The primordials were raging, shaping the land with fire and ice. But the Aboleth slipped into the deep oceans, the one place the fires of the primordials could not easily reach. There, in the cold dark, they built their first empire. We must discuss the nature of this empire, because it is distinct from any surface kingdom. When we think of an empire, we think of borders, trade routes, flags, and armies. The Aboleth Empire had none of these. It was a psychic network. It was a domination of the biosphere. In these early days, the Aboleths began to experiment. They are master shapers of flesh, just as a dwarf shapes metal or an elf shapes wood. The Aboleth shapes biology. They did not have tools in the traditional sense. They used their minds and their mucus. They reached out to the primitive life forms of the ocean. Giant crustaceans, primordial fish, formless jellies, and they twisted them. This is where we see the origins of the Chul, a creature we will discuss in great depth later. But for now, understand that the Chul was not a natural evolution. It was a manufactured tool, designed to be the hands of the Aboleths, allowing them to manipulate the physical world without risking their own slimy, precious forms. The Aboleth Empire covered the entire world. Surface land was irrelevant to them, mostly because there was very little of it, or it was constantly being destroyed by the primordials. The ocean was the world, and in that ocean, the Aboleth was absolute. They built cities. The most famous of these in legend is Golismorga. But there were thousands of others. These cities were not built of stone blocks cut and mortared. They were grown. They used secreting corals and calcified mucus to create towering spires that spiraled up toward the surface, but never breached it. The geometry of these cities is often described as non-Euclidean, a term that gets thrown around a lot, but here it means something specific. The angles of the architecture are designed to focus psychic energy. Walking, or swimming, through an Aboleth city is an assault on the mind. The very shape of the doorways and the twist of the spires are designed to amplify the telepathic signals of the Aboleth overlord. For eons, this was the state of the world. The Aboleths ruled. They enslaved anything that developed a mind. If a creature evolved sentience, The Aboleths were there to shackle it. They fed on experiences. This is a crucial piece of lore. Aboleths consume food for biological sustenance, but they consume memories for psychic sustenance. They enjoy the sensation of another being's terror, joy, and despair. They are gourmands of experience. During this age of chains, the Aboleths encountered no true resistance. They were the apex. They were the gods in all but name. And then the disaster occurred. The event that every Aboleth remembers with a burning cold hatred. The arrival of the gods. The lore surrounding this is vague because the gods do not like to talk about a time when they weren't in charge, and the Aboleths view it as the great theft, but essentially beings from the outer planes, entities of good, evil, law, and chaos, turned their gaze upon the material plane. They saw a world ripe for influence. They saw the souls of the emerging races. The Aboleths remember the sky tearing open. They remember the water boiling as avatars of divine power descended. For the first time, the Aboleths faced beings they could not dominate. You cannot enslave a god. You cannot use your mucus to rewrite the biology of a deity. The Aboleths fought, of course. They unleashed their Chul armies. They utilized psionic weapons that could shatter mountains. But they were fighting against the fundamental concepts of reality. The gods uplifted the slave races. They gave them divine magic, a power the Aboleths cannot replicate and despise. This is why Aboleths hate clerics and paladins above all others. Divine magic is the one frequency they cannot tune into. It is the static that disrupts their perfect memory. The Aboleth Empire was shattered. Their cities were cast down into the deepest trenches. The surface world was raised up, and the gods populated it with their favored children. Elves, dwarves, humans, dragons. The Aboleths retreated. They did not die. They rarely do. But they withdrew to the underdark of the ocean, to the places where the pressure is strong enough to crush a submarine, like a tin can. There, they have waited, for thousands of years. They do not view this as a defeat. They view it as a temporary setback to a being that remembers the birth of the world. 10,000 years of rule by humans and gods is merely a blinking of an eye. They are patient. They know that gods require belief to survive. If you kill the believers, the gods starve. And so, the Aboleths plot. They sit in their sunken cities, surrounded by the slime of their ancestors, plotting the downfall of the divine. They manipulate events on the surface. They lure the desperate and the power-hungry down into the dark. They are the tumor in the deep. They are the memory that will not fade. In the modern era of the realms, whether we are looking at the Sword Coast or the distant shores of Exandria, the Aboleths are rarely seen in the open. They are the puppeteers. When a coastal cult rises up, worshipping a god of the deep, it is often an Aboleth behind it. When a kraken wakes from its slumber, it is sometimes because an Aboleth whispered in its ear. But before we explore their grand schemes and their wars, we must understand the creature itself. We must look at the biology of this horror. How does it function? How does it reproduce? What happens if you are unfortunate enough to be touched by its tentacles? To understand the monster, we must dissect it, and that is what we shall do next. Now that we understand the history of these beings, the chronological anchor that ties them to the birth of the cosmos, we must turn our eyes to the physical reality of the creature itself. We must look at the biology of a god-eater. If you were to encounter an Aboleth in the deep, The first thing you would notice is not the creature, but the texture of the water. Around an aboleth, the ocean feels thick. It takes on an oily, viscous quality, tasting of copper and stagnant decay. This is the mucus cloud, and it is the first layer of the aboleth's anatomy we must dissect. Most aquatic creatures have a slime coat to protect their scales from parasites or infection. The aboleth's mucus is far more complex. It is a weaponized biological secretion, a clear, jelly-like substance that constantly exudes from the pores of its segmented flesh. This mucus is not merely a barrier, it is a transformative agent. Imagine swimming through this cloud. As the slime touches your skin, it doesn't just coat you, it reacts with your biology. In seconds, it begins to rewrite the cellular structure of your epidermis. This is one of the most terrifying aspects of Aboleth lore, the body horror of the caress. If you fail to resist this agent, your skin begins to turn translucent. You lose the ability to hold moisture in the way a mammal does. The membrane of your skin shifts to become permeable to water, but incapable of shielding you from the harshness of the air. You become a creature that must remain submerged. If you attempt to leave the water, your new skin dries, cracks, and burns with the intensity of acid. You are not just drowning in air. Your very flesh is rejecting the atmosphere, and cruelly, the mucus grants you the ability to breathe water. It strips away your humanity, your ability to walk on land, and chains you to the Aboleth's domain. You belong to the deep now. Pushing past the cloud, we see the beast. An adult aboleth is a titan of flesh, typically measuring 20 feet in length and weighing upwards of 6,500 pounds. However, ancients, those who have gorged on the memories of civilizations, can grow to 40 feet or more. They never stop growing. They only slow down. The shape is vaguely fish-like, but to call it a fish is an insult to nature. It is more akin to a primordial worm or a slug that has evolved in a nightmare. The body is segmented, thick and tubular, covered in a rubbery, amphibian skin that is usually a pale, sick green or a deep, bruised purple, often mottled with gray blotches. There are no scales, only that slick, glistening hide. Along the back, a dorsal fin runs the length of the spine, but it is ragged, membranous, and pulsed with strange rhythmic twitches. It does not move like a fish swims, with a side-to-side undulation. It moves with a disturbing, fluid grace, sliding through the water, as if friction does not apply to it. Protruding from the anterior section, what we might call the chest or the trunk, are 4 long tentacles. These are not the tentacles of an octopus. They lack suction cups. Instead, they are muscular lashes, smooth and tapering to fine points. They are sensory organs as much as they are weapons. When an aboleth touches you with a tentacle, it is not just feeling your shape. It is tasting your genetic history, and like the mucus cloud, the touch of the tentacle carries a potent disease. It is a concentrated dose of the transformative enzyme, capable of turning a hero into a slime-skinned thrall in mere minutes. But the face is what drives mortals mad. An aboleth has 3 eyes. They are not set horizontally like yours or mine. They are stacked vertically, one atop the other, in the center of its blunt, sloping forehead. These eyes are typically a glowing, malevolent red, protected by heavy, slit-lidded folds of skin. Why 3? Deep lore suggests a tripartite vision. The top eye sees the physical world, the light, the dark, the prey. The middle eye perceives the weave of magic, saying the arcane energies that permeate the water. And the bottom eye? The bottom eye looks into the mind. It sees the psychic spectrum. It is this eye that facilitates the Aboleth's probing telepathy. When an Aboleth looks at you, it does not see a warrior in plate mail or a wizard in robes. It sees your desires. It sees that deep, gnawing want you hide from everyone else. It sees the jealousy you feel toward your brother, the greed you have for the artifact, the fear you have of being forgotten. It pulls these desires out and dangles them before you like bait on a hook. This is their primary method of hunting. They do not always need to fight. They simply offer you what you want, and in exchange, they take your will. Below the eyes is the mouth. It is not a jaw. It is a lamprey-like orifice, a vertical slit or a circular maw lined with rows of serrated, needle-like teeth. But do not be mistaken. While they can tear flesh, they are filter feeders of a metaphysical sort. This brings us to the most unique aspect of their anatomy, the consumption of memory. Biologically, an aboleth eats organic matter. It consumes fish, squid, whales, and humanoids. It has a digestive tract, a stomach, and it produces waste. But this biological consumption is merely to fuel the meat of the body. To fuel the mind, the Aboleth must eat experiences. When an Aboleth kills a sentient creature, specifically when it consumes the brain or the life force of a humanoid, it absorbs the memories of that creature. This is not a metaphor. The neural pathways of the victim are copied and pasted onto the Aboleth's own vast, crystalline brain structure. If an Aboleth eats a dwarven smith, it suddenly knows how to forge mithril. It remembers the heat of the forge, the smell of the coal, the face of the dwarf's wife, the names of his children. It remembers the dwarf's pride and his shame. These memories become a permanent part of the Aboleth. They do not fade. An Aboleth can recall the taste of a wine drunk by a victim 3,000 years ago as vividly as if it were drinking it now. This accumulation of memory creates a psychology that is fundamentally alien. They are not individuals in the way we are. They are a compilation of millions of lives, all subsumed into one dominant will. This is why they are so arrogant. They literally possess the collective knowledge of eras. Now, we must address the question of gender and reproduction. Aboleths are hermaphroditic. They possess both male and female reproductive organs. Though these terms are crude approximations, they do not require a mate to reproduce. However, they reproduce incredibly slowly. An Aboleth might lay a clutch of eggs, usually 3 to 9, once every 5 years or so. These eggs are gelatinous, translucent spheres, roughly the size of a human head, usually hidden in the deepest, most inaccessible crevices of their lair. But here is the catch: they rarely need to reproduce. In nature, reproduction is a way to ensure the survival of the species because the parent will eventually die. The Aboleth does not plan on dying. This leads us to the final, and perhaps most significant, aspect of their anatomy: the eternal return. You cannot kill an Aboleth, not truly. If you strike one down, if you drive a sword through its brain, or blast it with lightning until it is nothing but charred meat, the Aboleth dies, the body rots, the slime dissolves. But the soul, the consciousness, it does not go to the fugue plane. It does not go to hell or the abyss. The spirit of the Aboleth is tethered, by ancient pact or biological imperative, to the elemental plane of water. Upon the destruction of its material form, the Aboleth spirit is instantly pulled across the planar boundaries. There, in the infinite, crushing depths of the plane of water, it begins to knit itself a new body. This process takes time. Days, perhaps months. It coalesces from the water itself, drawing on the elemental energies to reconstruct its flesh, its mucus, its eyes, and when it wakes up, fully formed, it remembers. It remembers the face of the one who killed it. It remembers the tactic you used. It remembers the spell you cast. And it adds that memory to the eternal archive. It learns. This is why Aboleths are the ultimate long-term villain. You can defeat them, yes. You can save the town, drive them back into the trench, and celebrate your victory. But you have not stopped it. You have merely inconvenienced it. You have sent it to its room to think about what it did, and it will spend every second of that exile plotting a revenge that might take a century to enact. They are the cancer of the cosmos. They are the stain that cannot be scrubbed out. So, we have a creature of slime and memory, a psychic tyrant that breathes water and eats minds, a being that cannot be permanently destroyed by mortal means. It is the perfect organism for domination, and domination is exactly what they sought. With their biology understood, we can now travel back to the time when they used these bodies to shackle the world. We must look at the architecture of their oppression. We must look at the height of their power before the gods interfered. We are going to the age of chains. Let us drift back, further back, past the current age of warring kingdoms and rising heroes, past the time of the fallen Netherrealm empires. We are going back to the era of the primordial silence. The scholars of Candlekeep and the sages of the great library of Greyhawk refer to this time by many names. The Blue Age, the Epoch of Slime. But among the Aboleths, within the vast echoing chambers of their shared memory, it is known simply as the Ascendancy, or to those few races that survived the oral histories of their enslavement, it is the Age of Chains. Imagine a world where the continents were different, shaped by the violent whims of the primordials. The oceans were vast, covering nearly the entire surface of the planet, and in this water, there was no freedom. There was only the will of the Aboleth. During this time, the Aboleth Empire was not merely a political entity, it was a biological status quo. The domination of the Aboleths over the ecosystem was absolute. They did not just rule over the creatures of the deep, they curated them. We must look at the nature of this slavery, for it is distinct from the servitude we see on the surface. When a human king enslaves a population, he uses fear, iron, and walls. The slave hates the master. The slave plots rebellion. The Aboleth does not want a rebellious slave. The Aboleth desires a slave that thanks it for the chains. In the Age of Chains, the Aboleths perfected the art of psionic domestication. They would take the primitive ancestors of the aquatic races, the early Lokatho, the proto-merfolk, the simple lizard folk, and they would their minds, but they did not leave them broken. They rebuilt them. Using their telepathy, they would surgically alter the neural pathways of their subjects. They removed the capacity for hope. They excised the concept of independence. In its place, they planted a deep chemical adoration for the master. A thrall in an Aboleth city does not work because it is afraid of the whip. It works because serving the Aboleth is the only thing that gives its life meaning. To be near the Aboleth, to bask in the warmth of its mucus cloud, is the highest form of ecstasy for a thrall. To be cast out, to be given freedom, is a punishment worse than death. It is a psychological addiction. This is the true horror of the Age of Chains. It was a time of peace. There were no wars between the slave races because they all served the same hive mind. There was no crime, for who would steal when the Aboleth knows your every thought? It was a utopia of absolute tyranny. But the Aboleths, in their arrogance and their genius, realized that biological slaves had limitations. Flesh tires, minds, even broken ones, can snap or go mad under the strain of the deep pressure. They needed a tool that was durable, obedient, and devoid of the messy complications of a soul. And so, they created the Chul. If the Aboleth is the mind of the empire, the Chul is the hand. We must pause to examine the Chul, for it is one of the few remaining artifacts of this ancient time that still plagues the waters of the world today. When you look at a Chul, you are looking at a biological machine designed thousands of years ago. It appears as a horrific amalgamation of crustacean and insect. It stands roughly 8 feet tall when rearing up, covered in a thick, chitinous armor that is typically a mottled green or brown, designed to blend into the silt and algae of the ocean floor. It has 4 legs for scuttling, 2 massive pincers capable of snapping a ship's mast, and a cluster of writhing, paralyzing tentacles around its mandibles. But the most terrifying aspect of the Chul is its origin. It did not evolve. There is no fossil record of a proto-Chul. It appeared suddenly in the history of the world. The Aboleths took the hardiest crabs, the most aggressive insects, and perhaps even the essence of earth elementals, and they fused them together using their mastery of flesh-warping magic. They designed the Chul with a very specific purpose: to hunt magic. The Aboleths are arcane masters, but they are wary of magic they cannot control. They designed the Chul to sense magic. A Chul can taste arcane power in the water. If a wizard casts a spell a mile away, the Chul's sensory antennae twitch. It knows. It hunts. The Aboleths also stripped the Chul of higher intelligence. A Chul is not sentient in the way a humanoid is. It does not have culture or language or art. It has programming. It understands commands in the deep speech of its masters, and it executes them with ruthless efficiency. Lore speaks of the Chul instinct. Even today, long after the fall of the great Aboleth cities, Chul can be found guarding ruins. They do not know why they guard them. They have been waiting for 10,000 years for an order that will never come. They stand like statues in the dark, covered in barnacles, waiting for the master to return. If you swim too close, their programming activates. They attack, they paralyze, and they attempt to drag you to the nearest holding pen, even if that pen is now just a pile of rubble. They are the ghosts of the Aboleth military-industrial complex. With their armies of Chul and their millions of thralls, the Aboleths built their cities. Let us visualize the capital of this empire, the city of Goddess Morga. Located in the deepest trench of the world, Goddess Morga is a place where the water pressure is enough to turn a dragon's bones to dust. But the Aboleths thrived here. The architecture of Goddess Morga is baffling to the surface mind. As we touched upon earlier, it relies on non-Euclidean geometry. But let us explore what that looks like. The buildings are not constructed of cut stone. They are secreted. The Aboleths engineered massive colonies of coral and stone-secreting bacteria. They grew their towers. These structures spiral upward like twisted intestines, or the shells of nightmare snails. They are sleek, covered in a layer of mucus that prevents barnacles or algae from taking hold. The city glistens in the dark. There are no stairs in Golis Morga, for its residents float. There are no doors, only open archways that resemble the gaping maws of fish. The layout of the city forms a massive sigil. If you were to view Golis Morga from far above, if you could see through the darkness, you would see that the streets and the towers form a glyph of domination. The city itself is a magical circle. Living within this city amplifies the Aboleth's power. The geometry focuses psionic energy. An Aboleth inside Golis Morga is 10 times more powerful than one in the open ocean. Their telepathy can reach for hundreds of miles. Scattered throughout the city are the obelisks. These are tall, triangular pillars of a black, glassy substance, perhaps obsidian, or perhaps something brought from the far realm. These obelisks pulse with a faint, violet light. They are the storage drives of the Empire. Just as an Aboleth stores memories in its blood, it can offload memories into these obelisks. They contain the history of the world, recorded from the perspective of the oppressors. A wizard who touches one of these obelisks risks having their mind burned out by the sheer volume of data. They might learn the true name of a star, or the formula for a spell that can boil an ocean, or they might simply go catatonic, their brain overwhelmed by the alien thoughts of 1,000 dead Aboleth. During the Age of Chains, the hierarchy of the Aboleths was established. It is a meritocracy of memory. Aboleths do not have kings or queens. They do not have elections. They have the old ones. In Abolethic Society, respect is determined by age and the clarity of one's memory. An Aboleth that has lived for 5,000 years is superior to one that has lived for 500. The elder has consumed more, seen more, and its bionic will is stronger. Disputes between Aboleths are rarely physical. They do not bite each other. They engage in psychic duels. They lash out with their minds, attempting to dominate the other. The loser is not killed. That would be a waste of potential resources. The loser is subjugated. Yes, Aboleths enslave each other. If a younger Aboleth challenges an elder and fails, the elder will seize control of the younger's mind. The younger becomes a lieutenant, a specialized node in the elder's network. This creates a pyramid of will. At the top of the city's hierarchy sits the savant, the oldest, most magically gifted Aboleth. Beneath it are its direct subordinates, and beneath them are the younger brood, and beneath them are the chul, and finally, the thralls. It is a perfect system. It is cold, logical, and utterly devoid of compassion. During this age, the Aboleths also began to dabble in the arcane arts of wizardry. This is a critical distinction. Most monsters rely on innate abilities. A dragon breathes fire because it is a dragon. But an Aboleth studies. They learn to manipulate the weave of magic. They develop the glyphs. If you have ever played a game where you encountered a glyph of warding, know that the concept originated here. In the deep, the Aboleths mastered the art of trapping magic in writing. They covered their cities in explosive runes, symbols of insanity, and wards of scrying. A single wall in Golismorga might contain more magical traps than the entire treasure vault of a human kingdom. They were not content with the ocean. They began to look upward. Knockout, Nace. Lore indicates that the Aboleths of the Age of Chains began terraforming projects. They sought to melt the ice caps. They sought to call down rain that would never end. Their goal was the drowning of the world. They wanted to eliminate the dry lands entirely. Turning the planet into a single uninterrupted sphere of water, where their rule would be absolute. They constructed massive magical engines to heat the water. They bound water elementals to generate storms. They were slowly, methodically, winning the war against the land. And the primitive races of the surface, the ancestors of the humans and dwarves, huddled in their caves, watching the waters rise, year after year. They had no magic to stop it. They had no gods to pray to. They were merely waiting to drown. It was the eve of their ultimate victory. The water levels were higher than they had ever been. The Abolethic savants were preparing the final rituals to shatter the continental shelves. The silence of the cosmos was about to be permanent. But the universe abhors a vacuum, and the cries of the dying, even if they were not directed at a specific god, created a resonance, a need. The Age of Chains was ended not by a revolution of the slaves, but by an invasion from above. As we prepare to move to the next chapter of this dark history, hold in your mind the image of that perfect, slimy empire, the silent cities, the loyal slaves, the feeling of absolute control. Because we are about to watch it shatter, we are about to witness the event that taught the Aboleths the only emotion they had never felt before: fear. Fear. The water was cold. The silence was absolute. The Aboleths sat upon their coral thrones, their minds linked in a lattice of pure domination, listening to the rhythmic pulse of a world they owned completely. They were the architects of reality. They were the authors of history. And then, the sky broke. It is difficult to convey the sheer trauma of this moment for a species that had never known defeat. To an Aboleth, the arrival of the gods was not a miraculous event. It was a violation of natural law. It was an invasion by criminals. In the lore, this event is often described metaphorically by clerics as the dawning. They speak of light piercing the clouds, of hope descending to the oppressed. But we must look at this through the three vertical eyes of the Aboleth. To them, it was the day the roof of the world collapsed. The barrier between the material plane and the outer planes, the seven heavens, the abyss, the mechanic of nirvana, thinned and ruptured. We do not know exactly what caused it. Perhaps the collective psychic despair of the slave races reached a critical mass, acting as a beacon. Perhaps the gods were simply expanding their territory, seeking new worlds to colonize with their worshippers. Regardless of the cause, the effect was cataclysmic. Avatars of the divine descended. These were not the subtle manifestations we see today. These were the raw, unfiltered projections of deities. Imagine beings of pure fire plunging into the ocean, boiling the water for miles. Imagine giants of stone and iron wading through the continental shelves, smashing the delicate, mucus-spun spires of the Aboleth cities. The Aboleths retaliated instantly. They were not helpless. The savants of Golas Morga unleashed psionic blasts that could liquefy the brain of a titan. They rallied their armies of Chul, millions strong, to swarm the invaders. They cast 10th level spells, magic that has since been banned or lost to time, attempting to seal the rift in the sky. But they discovered a terrifying truth. You cannot enslave a god. When an Aboleth reaches into a mind, it looks for levers. It looks for fear, desire, or pride. It pulls those levers to take control, but when they reached into the minds of the gods, they found nothing they could grasp. They found an infinite, burning belief in concepts the Aboleths could not comprehend. Justice, mercy, sacrifice. This is the crux of the conflict. The Aboleth mind is purely logical and selfish. It understands transaction. I give you this, you give me that. Or I hurt you, and you obey. The concept of faith, of believing in something greater than oneself, without proof, of giving one's life for an abstract ideal, is a foreign language to them. It is gibberish. And because they could not understand it, they could not predict it. The gods did not just fight the Aboleths. They stole their property. They went to the slave pens. They went to the primitive humans, the dwarves, the elves, and they sparked the divine fire within them. Suddenly, the slaves stopped listening to the telepathic commands of their masters. A slave who had known only the mental voice of the Aboleth suddenly heard a new voice. The voice of Moradin, or Corellon, or Corellon, or Pelor. The slaves rebelled. The psychic network, the foundation of the Aboleth Empire, began to fray. Then came the reshaping. The gods raised the land in a geological upheaval that lasted mere decades. A blink of an eye in deep time. Massive continents were thrust upward. The ocean floor was buckled and broken. The Aboleth cities built in the calm, deep trenches, were suddenly exposed to the sun, or crushed under lifting tectonic plates. The water receded. The Aboleths were left stranded in the shallows, their skin burning under the hated yellow star. They were forced to retreat. They abandoned their great spires. They left behind their obelisks and their laboratories. They fled into the deepest, darkest crevices of the world. The underdark seas, the abyssal trenches, the places where the light of the gods could not reach. This event, the fall, scarred the Aboleth racial memory forever, but it did more than just defeat them militarily. It introduced a flaw in their perfect recall. We call this the divine key, or the blind spot. As we established, Aboleths inherit the memories of their ancestors. An Aboleth born today remembers the Age of Chains perfectly well. But when they try to remember the gods, there is a gap, there is a static. They can remember the fire. They can remember the pain. But they cannot remember the nature of the divine power that defeated them. They cannot analyze divine magic. To an Aboleth, arcane magic is science. It is formulas and weaves. But divine magic is a cheat code. It breaks the rules of reality. When a cleric casts a spell, an Aboleth perceives it as a hole in the universe. They cannot counterspell it as easily. They cannot learn it. An Aboleth can study a wizard's spellbook and learn Fireball in an hour. An Aboleth can read a holy text for 1,000 years and never be able to cast Cure Wounds. This inability to understand or replicate divine power drives them absolutely mad. It is the one thing in the multiverse that denies them. It is the one locked door in a house they believe they own. This brings us to their modern motivation. The Aboleths do not just want their empire back. They want to kill the gods. They are the ultimate atheists. They do not believe the gods are divine. They believe the gods are powerful impostors who stole the world. In the Aboleth worldview, the gods are parasites. They feed on the worship of mortals. If you stop the worship, the god dies. Therefore, the Aboleth long game is not to fight the gods directly. They tried that and lost. Their plan is to starve them. They work to corrupt mortal civilizations. They start cults that seem benevolent, but slowly twist the followers away from the true gods. They whisper into the ears of kings, convincing them to ban religion. They create false idols, statues of slime and stone, and trick mortals into worshipping them, knowing that these prayers go nowhere, wasting the spiritual energy that would otherwise feed a deity. Every Aboleth plot you encounter in a game is likely a tiny thread in this vast tapestry of deicide. If they are poisoning a town's water supply, it is not just to kill the people. It is to make the people doubt their god's protection. If they are recovering an ancient artifact, it is to find a weapon that can sever the connection between a cleric and their deity. This hatred is personal. When an Aboleth sees a holy symbol, it feels a physical revulsion. It remembers the burning light of the fall. Following the catastrophe, the Abolethic Society fractured. They were no longer the undisputed masters of a single world-spanning empire. They were scattered refugees. Some went to the elemental plane of water, establishing holdouts there. Some retreated to the far realm, merging even more deeply with the madness of that place. But many stayed on the material plane, hiding in the subterranean oceans of the Underdark. In the Forgotten Realms, this leads us to the rise of the Abolethic Sovereignty. Located miles beneath the surface of Faerun, in a sunless sea known as the Glimmer Sea, or the deepest earth, the Aboleths rebuilt, but they did not build the same way. They had learned caution. The city of Puente Yuefu is the prime example of this new era. Unlike the coral spires of the past, Puente Yuefu is a fortress, and terrifyingly, it is mobile. Legend and Spelljammer lore tells us that Puente Yuefu is not just a city. It is a massive organic vessel. It is an Aboleth city ship, carved from a colossal block of glyph-inscribed stone, capable of floating through the sky as easily as it floats through the water. This marks the transition of the Aboleths from sea monsters to cosmic threats. They realized that if the gods came from the stars, then the Aboleths must also go to the stars. The sovereignty began to experiment with the very nature of the soul. They realized that if they could not use divine magic, they would invent something to replace it. They began to harvest souls, not for worship, but for raw energy. In this dark period, they created the scum breeds we see today, degrading the noble lines of their former slaves into pathetic, hunchbacked wretches. They tightened their grip. They became more cruel, more paranoid. They became more cruel, more paranoid. The fall also changed their relationship with other aberrations. During the Age of Chains, the Aboleths were the only horrors that mattered. But after the fall, as the world cracked, other things slipped in. Beholders, mind flayers. The The Aboleths view the mind flayers Aboleths with a mix of amusement and contempt. The Aboleths are time travelers, fleeing a dying future. The Aboleths are the eternal past. The Aboleths want to eat brains. The Aboleths want to enslave them. They often war with each other in the Underdark, a silent, psychic struggle between the Squidheads and the Slime Lords. But the Aboleths have the advantage of patience. They remember when the Aboleths arrived. They know the Aboleths are desperate. The Aboleth is never desperate. It is inevitable. So we find the Aboleths in the current era, hidden, hateful, and hungry. They are the spiders at the center of a web made of water. They are waiting for the gods to grow weak. They are waiting for the mortals to forget. And they are changing. Recent lore suggests that some Aboleths are evolving. The exposure to the magical fallout of the spell plague and the Second Sundering has caused mutations. We hear whispers of the Uchulon, a hybrid of Chul and slime. We hear of Aboleths that have grown wings of shadow to fly in the air. But the most dangerous development is their interest in the skies above. The Abolethic Sovereignty is not content with the bottom of the ocean anymore. They have seen the stars, and they want them back. This brings us to a specific, terrifying stronghold of the Aboleths, one that bridges the gap between the deep ocean and the vacuum of space. We must talk about the connection between the Aboleths and the ancient spelljammers. We must talk about 20fu in detail, and the glyphs that bind reality. We are leaving the history books now. We are entering the active war zones of the current lore. We have spoken of the deep oceans of water, but now we must turn our gaze to a different kind of depth. A depth that is black, infinite, and cold, the ocean of night, the sea of stars. You might assume that a creature of slime and moisture would be bound to the planetary seas. Terrified of the vacuum of space, you would be wrong. To an Aboleth, the void between worlds is not a hostile environment. It is merely a larger, quieter ocean. It is the ultimate silence they crave. This brings us to the most terrifying evolution of the Aboleth species in recorded history. The Abolethic Sovereignty. While the scattered Aboleths of the Underdark, the hermits and the solitary tyrants, are dangerous, they are isolated. The Sovereignty is different, based primarily in the Sea of Fallen Stars on Toril, but extending its reach across the Phlogiston to other crystal spheres. The Sovereignty is an organized, militarized nation of aberrations. They are not just surviving, they are conquering. They are conquering. The heart of this power is the city of Benti-Ufu. If you were to see 20-Ufu, your mind would struggle to categorize it. It does not look like a city. It looks like a weapon. It is a colossal, jagged needle of stone, a monolith that towers thousands of feet high. It is carved from a single piece of rock, excavated from the bedrock of a dead world, in the far realm or the deep history of Aber-Tori. 25 does not rest on the ground. It floats. During the era of the spell plague, when the laws of magic went haywire and the geography of the world shifted, 20fu rose from the depths. It breached the surface of the Sea of Fallen Stars and ascended into the sky. Imagine the sight of a wet, dripping mountain of stone, covered in writhing runes, lifting out of the ocean, shedding megatons of water as it climbs into the clouds. 20fu is a spelljammer. In fact, it is one of the largest spelljamming vessels in existence. It is an organic ship in the sense that the stone is infused with the life force of the Aboleths. It does not need sails or a helm in the traditional sense. It is powered by the collective psychic will of the eldest, the ruling council of the sovereignty. And the interior of Wentufu is a honeycomb of fluid-filled chambers. It is a vertical labyrinth because Aboleths float. The concept of floor and ceiling is irrelevant. The corridors are tubes. The chambers are spherical, and everywhere, on every surface, are the glyphs. We must pause here to discuss the Abolethic glyphs, for they are the primary tool of the sovereignty, and a key distinction between them and their ancestors. In the Age of Chains, Aboleths used raw psionic domination. But the sovereignty realized that psionics requires active concentration. If the Aboleth sleeps or enters its restorative torpor, the domination can slip. They needed something permanent. They needed a way to impose their will on reality that would last forever. They developed a language of power. These are not the arcane runes of a wizard, which manipulate the weave of Mistra. These glyphs are an imposition of alien logic upon the physical world. When an Aboleth inscribes a glyph, it is scarring reality. In Enstuna, Aoi, there is the glyph of the open door, which allows them to bypass physical barriers or teleport vast distances. There is the glyph of the clouded mind, which creates a psychic fog, making it impossible for mortals to remember what they saw or heard in the area. There is the glyph of the slime curse, which triggers the transformation of the flesh simply by being looked at. The sovereignty uses these glyphs to construct their symbionts. This is a particularly gruesome aspect of their modern technology. The Aboleths of Wentufu do not wear armor or wield swords. They grow living tools. A symbiont is a creature that has been bred and glyph forged to serve a specific purpose as an item. Imagine a tentacle whip. This is not leather or chain. It is a living severed tentacle from a lesser aberration, kept alive by a glyph. When you hold it, it bonds to your nervous system. It writhes of its own accord. It anticipates your desire to strike. It is a weapon that feels pain and hate. Or consider the Mind Leech, a small slug-like symbiont that an Aboleth servant might attach to their own head. It enhances psionic power, but it feeds on the user's sanity. The sovereignty equips its thralls with these living weapons. A soldier of the sovereignty does not just carry a shield. He carries a living carapace that screams when it blocks a blow. This biotechnology makes their armies terrifying to behold. It is a fusion of flesh and magic that violates every natural law. But let us return to the stars. The Spelljammer connection. In the lore of wild space, Aboleths are a known and feared threat. They do not travel in wooden galleons like humans or elves. They travel in nautiloids, often stolen from Illithids and repurposed, or in unique Aboleth vessels that resemble giant stonefish or massive floating coral reefs encased in bubbles of air and water. An Aboleth in space is in its element. In the void, there is no gravity to weigh down their massive bulk. They can float freely. Their mucus clouds create a localized atmosphere. An Aboleth can drift through the vacuum for centuries, hibernating, dreaming of conquest, until it detects the gravity well of a populated world. The sovereignty's goal with Pontifu was to create a mobile capital that could travel between worlds. They sought to unite the Aboleths of Orth, Toril, Kryn, and the scattered clusters of the Astromundi cluster into a single pan-galactic force. This ambition reveals a shift in their psychology. Ancient Aboleths were content to rule their own pawns. The sovereignty realizes that the gods span multiple worlds, so the Aboleth resistance must also span multiple worlds. The hierarchy within the sovereignty is rigid and terrifying. At the top are the eldest. These are Aboleths of immense size and age. Some are rumored to be survivors of the original arrival from the far realm. Though this is debated, the elders do not have individual names that can be pronounced by tongues. They have telepathic signatures that feel like specific emotions, the feeling of drowning in ice, or the sensation of bones grinding. Below the eldest are the overseers. These are the administrators of Pontifu. They manage the glyphs, they oversee the breeding of the scum. They coordinate the spies on the surface. And then, there are the savants. In the sovereignty, a savant is a specialized aboleth that has dedicated itself to the study of a specific type of magic. There are savants of necromancy, who study how to enslave the ghosts of the dead, since ghosts retain memories. They are a delicacy to aboleths. There are savants of transmutation, who work on the flesh-warping protocols. One of the most chilling plots of the Abolethic Sovereignty in recent history, specifically around the city of Neverwinter, involved the chasm. Following the spell plague, a massive pit opened in the city of Neverwinter, spewing forth plague-changed horrors. Deep lore reveals that the sovereignty was manipulating this. They were not just causing chaos, they were attempting to terraform the surface. The blue fire of the spell plague was something the Aboleths found delicious. It was raw, chaotic magic. They learned to consume it. They realized that if they could infect the surface world with this spell plague, they could destabilize the weave, cutting the mortals off from their gods. The sovereignty began to weave a massive ritual. They sought to drag the city of Neverwinter, and eventually the entire Sword Coast, down into the Underdark, into the sea of fallen stars, not the surface sea, but the subterranean ocean beneath it. They wanted to physically lower the continent until it was submerged. They failed, thanks to the intervention of adventurers, but the attempt shows the scale of their thinking. They do not think in terms of invading a castle, they think in terms of relocating a tectonic plate. We must also touch upon the Key of Stars. This is an artifact of immense significance to the sovereignty. Lore describes it as a device capable of locking or unlocking the far realm. The Aboleths seek it not to open the door wide. For even they fear the total dissolution of reality. But to control the flow, they want to let in just enough far realm energy to poison the gods, but not enough to destroy the playground they wish to rule. This delicate balance highlights the Aboleth's unique position in the cosmology. They are of the far realm, but they are in the material plane. They are immigrants who want to remodel their new home to look like their old one, but they don't want to burn the house down. They need the structure of reality to exist so they can dominate it. You cannot enslave a chaotic void. You need a world with rules so you can break the people who follow them. The Aboleths of the sovereignty also display a unique ability to ride their thralls. So, in the ancient days, An Aboleth gave a command, and the thrall obeyed. The sovereignty has refined this. An Aboleth can project its consciousness into a special thrall, often a high-ranking Abolethic servitor or a dominated humanoid. The Aboleth sees through the thrall's eyes. It speaks through the thrall's mouth. This allows the Aboleth to attend diplomatic meetings in disguise, to spy on surface cities, or to lead armies on dry land, without ever leaving the safety of the water. If you meet a person whose eyes seem dead, whose skin is clammy, and who speaks with a cadence that is just slightly too slow, too rhythmic, you might be speaking to an Aboleth sitting comfortably in a tank 1,000 miles away. This projection ability means the sovereignty is everywhere. They are in the council rooms of kings. They are in the wizards' colleges. They are in the temples. They are gathering information. They are learning the weaknesses of the new age. As we look at the terrifying might of Bentiefu and the sovereignty, we must ask, how do they maintain this? Who builds the stone ships? Who carves the glyphs? Who fights the wars on the ground? The Aboleth is the mind, but it needs a body. It needs millions of bodies. We have mentioned the chul and the scum, but we must now descend into the tragedy of the Aboleth servants. We must look at what happens to a species when it is subjected to 10,000 years of selective breeding and psychological torture. We are going to look at the servitors of the slime, the scum, the deep scions, the tragic, broken things that worship the monsters in the dark. Section 6. Servitors of the slime. We have spoken at length of the architects, the dreaming tyrants that float in the darkness, but an empire is not built by the emperor. It is built by the hands that stack the stone. It is maintained by the guards who hold the spears, and in the submerged dominion of the Aboleths, those hands and those spears are things of nightmares. We must now descend from the high alien philosophy of the Abolethic savants and lower ourselves into the muck. We are going to the slave pens. We are going to look at the ecology of servitude that surrounds these aberrations. To understand the Aboleth, you must understand how they view other living things. To you, a person is a complex individual with dreams, fears, and rights. To an Aboleth, a person is a resource. A humanoid is merely a collection of wet biology that can be repurposed. They are raw materials, just as a carpenter looks at a tree and sees a chair. The Aboleth looks at a human and sees a tool. But unlike the carpenter, the Aboleth does not use a saw or a chisel. It uses genetic alchemy and psychic surgery. Let us begin with the most common, and perhaps the most tragic, of their creations, the scum. In the surface world, if a scholar were to flip through a bestiary, they might dismiss the scum as a simple fishman or a feral aquatic goblinoid. This is a dangerous underestimation. A scum is not a natural creature. It has no place in the evolutionary tree of the natural world. A scum is the result of a legacy of domination. Deep lore suggests that the scum were once humans, or elves, or beings of the surface who were dragged down into the deep eons ago. The Aboleths did not just enslave these captives. They bred them. They engaged in a eugenics program that spanned thousands of years, stripping away the traits they found undesirable: independence, beauty, hope, and amplifying the traits they needed. When you look at a scum, you are looking at a ruin of humanity. They are hunchbacked, their spines twisted to allow for a swimming motion rather than an upright gait. Their skin is a rubbery, translucent purple or sickly gray, covered in a layer of slime that smells of old copper and rot. They have webbed hands and feet, and their heads are fish-like, with wide, unblinking eyes and gill slits that flutter nervously at their necks. But the horror is not in their appearance, it is in their minds. The Aboleths bred the rebellion out of them. A scum does not serve because it is afraid of the whip. It serves because it is biologically incapable of imagining a life without a master. They are genetically coded for submission when an Aboleth is near. A scum feels a chemical wash of comfort when the Aboleth is gone. The scum becomes catatonic, rocking back and forth in the dark, waiting for the god to return, waiting for the god. They are the laborers of the deep cities. They polish the slimestone walls. They herd the food stock. They fight with rusted tridents and nets, throwing themselves into the jaws of danger, not out of bravery, but because their lives have zero value to them. They are the definition of expendable. However, the Aboleths recognized early in the Age of Chains that biological slaves have limitations. Flesh is soft, bones break, minds, even broken ones, can panic. They needed an enforcer that knew no fear and felt no pain. And so, they constructed the Chul. If the scum is the worker, the Chul is the tang. We must clarify the nature of the Chul, because it is often mistaken for a giant crustacean. It is not an animal. A crab evolves to eat and reproduce. A Chul was designed to hunt magic. During the height of their empire, the Aboleths took the hardiest life forms of the primeval ocean, giant insects, crustaceans, and perhaps the essence of earth elementals, and fused them together. The result is a biological machine. Imagine a creature standing 8 feet tall, covered in chitinous plates, the color of dried seaweed. It has 4 scuttling legs that can navigate the shifting silt of the ocean floor or the cobblestones of a surface city with equal ease. It has 2 massive pincers, each large enough to snap a horse in half. But look closely at the mouth. There is no simple maw. Instead, there is a writhing mass of pink sensory tentacles. These are not for feeding, they are for paralyzing. The Aboleths designed the Chul to capture, not kill. The Aboleth feeds on memories, and a dead brain holds no fresh experiences. Therefore, the Chul is equipped with a potent paralytic venom secreted from its facial tentacles. It grapples a victim with its claws, crushing them just enough to incapacitate, and then leans in. The tentacles brush the victim's skin. The toxin takes hold. The victim is frozen, fully conscious, screaming internally, while the Chul drags them back to the master. The most terrifying aspect of the Chul is its collector instinct. The Aboleths imbued these creatures with a rudimentary psychic sensor. A Chul can smell magic if you are carrying a wand of magic missiles or wearing a ring of protection. The Chul can sense the arcane resonance from hundreds of feet away. They prioritize these targets. Even today, thousands of years after the fall of the great Aboleth cities, you can find Chul guarding the ruins. They stand perfectly still, sometimes buried under centuries of sand, waiting. They do not starve. They do not age. They simply wait for a command in a language that is no longer spoken. They are the ghosts of a military-industrial complex that died eons ago, still executing their final orders, still executing their final orders. But the scum and the chul are monsters of the deep. They cannot walk unnoticed among the surface dwellers. The Aboleths needed eyes in the court of the king. They needed hands in the guild of the wizard. Enter the deep scion. Andy. This is a relatively newer addition to the lore, appearing prominently in accounts from the 5th Age, such as Volo's Guide to Monsters. The deep scion is the infiltrator. The origin of a deep scion is always a story of desperation. It begins with a shipwreck. A sailor, a pirate, or a noble is thrown into the freezing ocean. They fight the waves, but the water fills their lungs. They sink. The darkness closes in. And then, in the silence of drowning, a voice speaks in their mind. It is smooth, ancient, and persuasive. Do you wish to live? The dying soul screams yes. Then, you are mine. The Aboleth saves them. It brings them to its lair, not to eat them, but to change them. The victim undergoes a ritual of warping. They are submerged in a vat of black, alchemical fluid mixed with the Aboleth's own blood. Their bones soften and reform. Their lungs shift. When they are returned to the surface, they look exactly as they did before. The sailor walks back into the tavern. The noble returns to their estate. They claim they survived by a miracle. They hug their families. They laugh. But it is a lie. The deep scion is a shapeshifter beneath the human skin. The monster waits at any moment. Usually when their cover is blown or their master commands a strike, they can shed their guise. The jaw unhinges, filled with rows of shark-like teeth. The skin hardens into chitinous scales. The legs fuse or shift into flippers. They become a hybrid combatant, capable of breathing water and moving with supernatural speed. The psychological horror of the deep scion is immense. They retain their memories. They remember loving their spouse. They remember their loyalty to their king. But they cannot act on it. The Aboleth holds their soul in a vice. If they disobey, the Aboleth can twist the psychic link, causing agonizing pain, or instantly transforming them into a mindless spawn. So they live as spies. They poison the town's water supply. They steal the research of the local wizard. They lead the ship into the path of the storm, where the Aboleth waits. They are the sleeper agents, hating themselves with every breath, yet terrified of the alternative. All to see. In the out of C1. Finally, we must discuss the mechanism that binds all these servants together. We must talk about the enslavement and the caress. When you fight an Aboleth in a game, enslave is a wisdom saving throw. In the lore, it is a psychic demolition. The Aboleth does not just charm you. It opens a channel between its mind and yours. For a split second, you see the universe through its eyes. You see the vastness of time. You see the insignificance of your own life. You feel the crushing weight of its intellect. Your ego collapses. The Aboleth fills the void where your will used to be. Gendum. An enslaved creature is not a zombie. An enslaved wizard can still cast their most complex spells. An enslaved fighter can still use their martial maneuvers. The Aboleth wants your competence. The victim simply believes, with absolute certainty, that the Aboleth is their best friend, their lover, their god. They will fight to the death to protect the master, weeping tears of joy as they do so. As they do so, To ensure the slave does not run away, the aboleth uses its mucus cloud. This is the ultimate biological shackle. When an aboleth touches a creature with its tentacles, or when a creature swims too long in the clouded water, the transformation begins. The victim's skin becomes clear and slimy. The mucous membrane strips away the ability to hold moisture. The victim is now water dependent. If they leave the water, their skin dries, cracks, and burns as if doused in acid. They take damage every minute they are in the air. This is the cruelty of the aboleth. Even if a cleric casts dispel magic and breaks the psychic enslavement, the victim is still physically ruined. They cannot go home. They cannot walk in the sun. They are forced to retreat back into the water, back to the dark, because it is the only place they can breathe without pain. This is the ecosystem of the deep. It is a hierarchy of pain. At the bottom, the scum, mindless and broken. In the middle, the chul, silent and deadly. Above them, the deep scions, living their tragic lives. And above them all, the enslaved champions, trapped in a prison of their own flesh. It is a perfectly oiled machine of suffering, designed to feed the ego and the belly of the aboleth. But the aboleths are not the only powers in the deep. They are the schemers. Yes, they are the wizards of the water. But there are things in the ocean that do not need to scheme. There are things that do not need to use mind control, because they can simply wrap a tentacle around a galleon and drag it down to the crushing dark. We are leaving the domain of the aberration now. We are moving from the madness of the far realm to the raw, elemental fury of the material plane. We are going to talk about the titans, the stormcallers, the localized natural disasters that have plagued sailors since the first boat was carved from wood. We are going to talk about the krakens. We leave the claustrophobic, slime-coated tunnels of the Aboleth cities now. We swim upward, leaving the oppressive weight of the underdark seas. But we do not seek the light, we seek the storm. While the Aboleth is the manifestation of the alien, the creeper in the dark, and the manipulator of memory, there is another power in the deep. It is a power that does not care about your mind. It cares about your destruction. It is a power that does not hide in the shadows. It generates the storm that blocks out the sun. We are speaking of the Kraken. Kraken. If you ask a sailor in a tavern in Waterdeep or Baldur's Gate what they fear most, they might say pirates or dragons. But if you ask an old sailor, one with salt in his beard and eyes, that have seen the edge of the map, he will not speak the name. He will simply gesture to the deep water. To understand the Kraken, we must first unlearn a common misconception. Many surface dwellers, and even some inexperienced adventurers, confuse the Kraken with the giant squid or the giant octopus. They see a tentacle rise from the waves and think, a big beast. This is a fatal error. A giant squid is an animal. It has an intelligence score of 2 or 3. It acts on instinct, hunger, fear, reproduction. It is part of the natural order. A kraken is not an animal. It is a titan. In the official classification of lore, the kraken is a monstrosity, but specifically, it is a titan. This puts it in the same weight class as the Tarrasque or the Empyrean. It is a being of near divine power. More importantly, a kraken is a genius. An adult kraken typically possesses an intelligence score of 22. To put that in perspective, an average human has a 10. A brilliant wizard might have an 18 or 20. A lich, an undead master of arcane secrets, usually has a 20. Oh, the kraken is smarter than the archmage who is trying to kill it. It is smarter than the king who rules the coast. It is an entity with an intellect that is vast, cold, and calculating. It does not just smash ships because it is hungry. It smashes ships because it serves a plan, or because it enjoys the specific sound of wood snapping and men screaming. Let us look at their origins, for they are as old as the Aboleths, but they come from a very different source. While the Aboleths arrived from the far realm before the gods, the Krakens were born here. They are the children of the material plane and the elemental plane of water. We must look back to the Dawn War. This is the conflict between the gods, the deities of the outer planes, and the primordials, the elemental lords of the inner planes. The primordials were beings of raw chaos and power: fire, earth, air, and water. They did not want order. They wanted a churning, ever-changing maelstrom of creation. When the gods came to impose order, to fix the continents in place, and create predictable seasons, the primordials went to war. And just as the gods created angels and exarchs to fight for them, the primordials created the titans. The Krakens were the living weapons of the water primordials. Imagine a being designed by a god of angry oceans. They were built to tear down the coastal cities of the divine races. They were built to wrestle dragons out of the sky and drown them. They were the ultimate expression of the ocean's fury. When the Dawn War ended, the gods were victorious. The primordials were banished or imprisoned. But the Krakens remained. They were left behind, like siege engines abandoned on a battlefield. They retreated into the deepest trenches of the material plane, known as the abyssal trenches, not to be confused with the abyss of demons. There, in the crushing dark, they slumbered, and they remembered. This origin story defines their psychology. Unlike the Aboleths, who see themselves as the rightful owners of the universe who were robbed, the Krakens see themselves as rulers in waiting. They are the apex predators of the planet. They are technically amphibious, capable of breathing both air and water. This is a terrifying detail often overlooked. A kraken can drag itself onto a shoreline. It can crawl over an island. Nowhere near the coast is safe. However, they prefer the deep. They prefer the pressure. Let us visualize the sheer scale of these beings. A standard kraken described in the monster manual is gargantuan. But gargantuan is a game mechanic term that simply means 20 by 20 feet or larger. In the lore, an ancient kraken is the size of an island. When a kraken rises, it displaces so much water that it creates tsunamis. Its tentacles can reach lengths of hundreds of feet. Stories tell of krakens wrapping their arms around the entire hull of a warship, a galleon with 3 decks and 50 cannons, and snapping it in half like a dry twig. The central body is usually cephalopod-like, a massive mantle of rubbery flesh, often spiked or armored with ancient calcified barnacles and scars from battles with whales or dragons. The beak, located at the center of the tentacles, is diamond hard. It can bite through mithril, It can crush a stone tower. But unlike a squid, the Kraken often has eyes that betray its unnatural nature. They are not the animalistic eyes of a fish. They are glowing, intelligent orbs that burn with malice. Some depictions give them humanoid faces hidden within the folds of their flesh, or massive toothy maws that resemble a shark more than a squid. The primary drive of a Kraken is ego. Aboleths want control. Dragons want treasure. Demons want destruction. The Kraken wants acknowledgement. A Kraken believes it is a god. And honestly, who is going to argue with it? It commands the weather. It commands the beasts of the sea. It lives for thousands of years. To a primitive coastal tribe. The difference between a Kraken and a god like Umberlee is academic. The Kraken is there. It is tangible. If you don't sacrifice to it, it eats your village. This leads to the formation of Kraken cults, which we will explore in depth later. But the root of it is here. The Kraken demands tribute. It is vanity incarnate. They are fiercely territorial. An Aboleth might share a city with other Aboleths in a hierarchy. A Kraken is a solitary ruler. A single ocean trench is not big enough for two of them. If two Krakens meet, the resulting battle triggers earthquakes that can be felt on the surface continents. They tear each other apart until one submits or dies. This isolation makes them paranoid. They sit in their lairs, surrounded by the wreckage of centuries, plotting. Plotting what? They plot the release of the chains of order. Remember, they were made by the primordials to fight the gods. That programming is still in their blood. They hate the structured world of the surface. They hate the trade routes, the lighthouses, the navies. They want to return the world to a watery chaos where the strong eat the weak, and they are the strongest of all. We must also distinguish between the Kraken and the Leviathan. In D&D cosmology, the Leviathan is often an elder elemental, a manifestation of the plane of water itself. It is more like a living hurricane of water in the shape of a serpent. It is a force of nature with little personality. The Kraken is flesh and blood and magic. It has a personality. It has a name. Speaking of names, Krakens invest great power in their identities. A Kraken is not just a Kraken. It is the Kraken of the Purple Rocks. It is Slar-Krethel. It is Traumacratis. To know a Kraken's true name is dangerous, but they often have magical words that alert them when their name is spoken with intent. Let us touch briefly on their lifespan. Krakens are biologically immortal. They do not age in the way humans or even dragons do. A dragon will eventually reach its twilight years and pass away or become a Dracolich. A Kraken just grows. As they grow, they sleep. This is known as the Kraken's sleep. They can hibernate for decades or centuries. During this time, rock and coral grow over their shells. They become indistinguishable from the ocean floor, but their minds are awake. They dream, and their dreams are so powerful that they bleed into reality. A sleeping Kraken can act as a regional beacon for psionic energy. Creatures living near a sleeping Kraken become aggressive. Storms seem to linger over the area longer than they should. The bad weather of a region might just be the nightmare of a monster sleeping 5 miles down, ND. This biological immortality means that they hoard knowledge. A Kraken that has been alive for 10, 0 years knows where the sunken cities of the elves are. It knows the location of the crashed Netherese flying cities. It knows where the artifacts of the Dawn War were dropped. This makes them information brokers. Often, in high-level campaigns, adventurers might not fight a Kraken to kill it. They might seek it out to ask it a question. Imagine the terror of that negotiation. You have to dive into the abyss, stand before a creature that could swallow you whole without chewing, and offer it something it wants in exchange for a secret. And what does a Kraken want? It doesn't want gold. It has all the gold of 1,000 shipwrecks. It wants power. It wants a political rival eliminated. It wants a temple of a sea god desecrated. It wants a specific, unique, magical item that was stolen from it 400 years ago. The interaction between Krakens and other deep-sea powers is tense. We discussed the Aboleths. Aboleths and Krakens are the two superpowers of the dark. Generally, they avoid each other. This is the Cold War of the deep. The Aboleths know that in a physical fight, a Kraken would tear an Aboleth to shreds. One-on-one, the Kraken wins. It is simply too big, too strong, and immune to many of the Aboleth's tricks. However, the Kraken knows that the Aboleth has a network. If a Kraken kills an Aboleth, the Aboleth will respawn and bring an army of Chul, or worse, it will manipulate surface heroes to come down and kill the Kraken. So they maintain a respectful distance. The Aboleths rule the underdark seas and the cerebral aspect of domination. The Krakens rule the open ocean trenches and the physical aspect of destruction. Occasionally, they ally. This is the worst-case scenario for the world. An alliance between the memory of the Aboleth and the might of the Kraken is an extinction-level event. As we prepare to look deeper into the specific biology of how they generate their storms and the magical properties of their bodies, keep in mind the personality we have established. You are not dealing with a beast. You are dealing with a fallen angel of water. You are dealing with a narcissist the size of a mountain. You are dealing with a creature that looks at the gods and thinks, I could do better. The Aboleth wants to enslave you. The Kraken wants you to look at it, despair, and then drown. Now, let us examine the tools they use to achieve this. Let us look at the anatomy of a Titan, the ink, the lightning, and the control of the very atmosphere. We have established that the Kraken is a Titan, a being of ego and ancient grudge. But ego alone does not sink a fleet of warships. A grudge does not shatter a lighthouse. To understand the threat, we must dissect the weapon. We must look at the biology of the Kraken and understand how a creature of flesh and blood can replicate the wrath of a god. When a Kraken attacks, it does not begin with a tentacle rising from the water. It begins with the air. The first sign of a Kraken's presence is the barometric drop in the Yatio. Biologically, the Kraken is a living conduit to the elemental plane of water, and, by proximity, the chaotic energies of the plane of air. Its very presence thins the boundaries of reality. As an adult Kraken wakes or enters a region, the air pressure plummets. To a sailor, this is the devil's silence. The wind dies instantly. The sails go slack. The birds stop singing and flee inland. The air becomes heavy, thick with moisture, tasting of copper and ozone. Your ears pop. The hair on your arms stands up. This is not a spell the Kraken casts by waving a wand. This is a regional effect. It is the physiological aura of the Titan, within 6 miles of a Kraken's lair. The weather is entirely under its control. It creates a microclimate. The Kraken can manifest a thunderstorm in a clear blue sky within minutes. It does this by releasing vast amounts of elemental energy from its pore, heating the water around it to create steam, while simultaneously cooling the air above to create condensation. It is a living, thermodynamic engine. When you fight a Kraken, you are fighting the hurricane. The wind screams, imposing disadvantage on ranged attacks. The waves swell to 40 or 50 feet, turning the battlefield into a chaotic, shifting terrain, where simply staying on your feet is a heroic feat. And the lightning. Let us speak of the lightning storm. Ne ish se entio and down to cheat. In the 5th edition Lore and Mechanics, a Kraken has the ability to call down lightning. But deep lore suggests this is not calling down in the druidic sense. The lightning originates from the Kraken itself. Krakens possess specialized organs along their mantle, similar to the electrocytes found in electric eels, but scaled up to the size of a cathedral. These organs generate massive bioelectric charges. When the Kraken releases this energy, it can arc through the water, frying anything swimming near it, or it can arc upward, connecting with the storm clouds it has created. The bolt travels up, charges the cloud, and then strikes back down at a target the Kraken designates. It is a closed-loop circuit of destruction. The Kraken is the ground, and the Kraken is the sky. Now, let us look at the tentacles. A Kraken typically has 10 main tentacles, though 2 are often larger and more dexterous, serving as the primary arms. These are not merely muscular appendages. They are covered in suction cups, each rimmed with a serrated, chitinous ring. When a Kraken grapples a ship, it is not just holding it. The suction cups bite into the wood. The serrated rings act like thousands of saw blades. As the Kraken tightens its grip, it is literally sawing the keel of the ship in half. This explains the siege monster trait found in the game statistics. A Kraken deals double damage to objects and structures: stone, wood, iron. It makes no difference. The Kraken is designed to dismantle civilization. Naju, it is no ordinary activity. If you are unfortunate enough to be grabbed by a tentacle, you face the crushing constraint. The pressure exerted by a Kraken's grip is enough to turn bone to powder. It does not need to bite you to kill you. It simply squeezes until your armor collapses inward. But perhaps the most insidious biological weapon is the ink. We know that squids use ink to escape. A puff of black, and they are gone. The Kraken's ink is different. It is not a defensive tool. It is not a defensive hazard. The ink sac of a Kraken produces a substance that is chemically toxic and magically opaque. When released, it does not diffuse quickly like normal ink. It hangs in the water, expanding into a cloud that can cover a sphere with a radius of 60 feet or more. Inside this cloud, light does not exist. Even magical light is dampened. But the horror is the toxicity. The ink burns. It is caustic. Breathing it, water breathing or not, sears the lungs. Touching it blisters the skin. Furthermore, the ink interferes with sensory perception. Lore suggests that the ink has a psionic dampening effect. It cuts off telepathy. It muddles direction. A diver caught in the ink cloud does not know which way is up. They cannot tell if the Kraken is in front of them or behind them. They are blind, burning and lost in the void. And the Kraken? The Kraken has true sight. It sees through the dark. It sees through the ink. It sees the heat of your body and the magic of your sword. To the Kraken, the ink cloud is transparent. It is shooting fish in a barrel. And you are the fish. We must also discuss the beak. Hidden at the center of the writing mass of tentacles is the maw. The beak of a Kraken is made of a material similar to dragon bone, but denser. It is vertically aligned, designed to shear. The bite of a Kraken is the executioner's stroke. If the tentacles are for catching and the lightning is for softening, the bite is for ending. A Kraken can swallow a giant shark whole. It can swallow a fully armored paladin in one gulp. And once inside, the gullet, being swallowed by a Kraken, is not instant death. It is a slow, agonizing dissolve. The stomach acid of a titan is potent enough to dissolve magical items over time. There are legends of artifacts, swords of heroes, staffs of power, resting in the bellies of ancient Krakens, slowly being digested, their magic seeping into the beast, making it even stronger. Now, let us move from the creature to the lair. A Kraken does not just live in a hole, it changes the geography of the ocean floor. The lair actions of a Kraken are a manifestation of its authority over the deep. First, there is the current control. A Kraken can mentally command the flow of water. Imagine swimming toward the monster to strike it, only to be hit by a wall of water moving at 60 miles per hour in the opposite direction. The Kraken can push you away, or, more terrifyingly, it can pull you in. It can create a vortex, a whirlpool that drags everything in a 60-foot radius into its maw. Enter channel, and the chobe, and sequender, and kakrenix. Second, there is the conductivity. The Kraken can electrify the water around it. It does not need to strike you directly. It pulses energy, and the salt water carries the shock to everyone nearby. Third, the biological servants. The region around a Kraken's lair is often teeming with aggressive sea life. Sharks, barracudas, and killer whales are drawn to the Kraken's psychic presence. They act as the Kraken's immune system. Attacking anything that isn't the Titan itself. When you enter the lair, you are also contending with water elementals. Because the Kraken is a rift to the elemental plane, water elementals often spontaneously form around it. These are not summoned creatures. They are side effects. They are the ocean itself standing up to defend its king. Finally, we must touch on the concept of freedom of movement. Krakens are immune to being slowed. You cannot paralyze a Kraken. You cannot restrain it with nets or magic chains. Biologically, its nervous system is redundant and highly adaptable. Magically, it is too slippery, too fluid. This trait is terrifying because it means you cannot stop it, you cannot slow it down to buy time for the civilians to evacuate. It moves at a steady, relentless pace of 60 feet per round swimming, and it ignores difficult terrain. It creates the feeling of inevitability, like a mudslide or a lava flow. It is coming, and physics will not help you. This physiology creates a creature that is a multi-stage boss fight. In the first stage, you fight the storm and the ship-breaking tentacles. In the second stage, you are in the water, fighting the ink and the lightning. In the third stage, if you are foolish enough to get close, you fight the beak and the stomach. And all the while, the creature is laughing at you, not with a voice, but with a telepathic broadcast of pure superiority. It is important to remember that while the Kraken is a physical powerhouse, it relies on its intelligence. It knows its own anatomy. A Kraken will use its reach. It has a reach of 20 to 30 feet with its tentacles. It will stay out of range of your swords, grab the cleric, and drag them underwater. It knows that most surface dwellers cannot breathe water. It uses the environment as a weapon. It will grapple a wizard and hold them inside the ink cloud so they cannot see to cast spells that require sight of the target. It is a tactical genius in a body designed for mass destruction. And this physical dominance is why the Kraken does not need to build cities like the Aboleths. It does not need walls, it is the wall. However, even a Titan has needs. It cannot be everywhere at once. It desires information, it desires worship, and for that it needs agents who can walk on the land, infiltrate the courts, and whisper its name in the dark alleys of the surface world. And no, the Kraken does not have a hive mind like the Aboleths. It has a cult, it has a secret society. We are moving now from the wet, violent biology of the monster to the dry, insidious politics of its followers. We are going to the Sword Coast. We are going to talk about the Purple Rocks. We are going to talk about the Kraken Society. And here, I'm going to talk about the Kraken Society. Come with me now. Step out of the water. Shake the salt from your cloak and wring out your boots. We are leaving the crushing pressure of the deep trenches, but do not think for a moment that you are safe. In fact, you are in more danger now. Standing on the dry cobblestones of a busy port city, than you ever were in the abyss. In the abyss, the monster is a mountain of flesh. You can see it. You can flee from it. Here, on the surface, the monster is a whisper. It is a bribe passed in a dark alley. It is a sigil carved faintly into a doorframe. It is a network of spies, assassins, and corrupt nobles who answer to a god they have never seen, but whose voice they hear in their dreams. We are going to talk about the invisible tentacles that strangle the Sword Coast. We are going to talk about the Kraken Society and the dark majesty of its master, Slacrethel. To the common folk of Faerun, the Kraken Society is a myth. Delhi, a boogeyman story told to scare sailors. They believe it is a loose confederation of pirates and smugglers who use the symbol of the purple squid to intimidate merchants. If only they knew the truth. The Kraken Society is not a pirate crew. It is an intelligence agency. It is an Illuminati of the deep. It is perhaps the most extensive and efficient criminal organization in the Forgotten Realms, rivaling even the Zentarim or the Shadow Thieves of Amnon. But while the Zentarim seek wealth and the Shadow Thieves seek political leverage, the Kraken Society seeks something far more esoteric. The Ascension. The Society is the eyes and ears of the Kraken Slacrethel. Before we dissect the Society, we must understand the King. We must look at the entity that sits at the center of the web. Kretel, Indesinaukorn, Ishinani, Indanel. He is not just a kraken. In the taxonomy of monsters, he is unique. He is a mutant, a genius, and a chosen vessel of dark powers, residing in the trackless sea, west of the Sword Coast and north of the Moonshae Isles. Slarkretel claims a domain that stretches for thousands of miles. He is ancient, even by Kraken standards. He was born in the earliest days of the world, hatched from an egg that drifted in the wake of the Dawn War. But unlike his brethren, who were content to simply be apex predators, Slarkretel wanted more. He looked at the small, fragile races of the surface, the elves, the humans, the dragons, and he saw them weaving magic. Most krakens rely on their innate biological power. Slarkretel studied. He is a spellcaster. In game terms, Slarkretel is often depicted as a 20th level wizard, in addition to being a challenge rating 25 Titan. Imagine the horror of that combination. A creature with the physical strength to crush a castle, who can also cast Wish, Meteor Swarm, or Power Word Kill. He does not need to touch you to destroy you. He can rewrite reality from the bottom of the ocean. Slarkretel is the self-proclaimed king of the trackless sea. He is also the chosen of Umberlee, the bitch queen. This relationship is complex. Umberlee is the goddess of the ocean's fury, and Slarkretel is her greatest champion. But deep lore suggests a tension there. Slarkretel does not serve Umberlee out of humility. He serves her because it grants him power, and because he secretly intends to replace her. He seeks divinity. He wants to ascend from Titan to God, to become the Lord of all depth. To achieve this, he needs belief. He needs fear. And he needs agents to destabilize the surface world, creating the kind of chaos that drives mortals to pray to the dark seas for mercy. This is where the Kraken Society comes in. Ilawi, Nanachant. The society is structured like a pyramid, but the top of the pyramid is submerged. At the bottom are the thugs, the smugglers, and the informants. These low-level operatives often don't even know who they work for. They think they are working for a powerful crime lord in Waterdeep or Neverwinter. They pass information, shipping schedules, troop movements, rumors of magical artifacts, up the chain. Above them are the lieutenants. These are the true believers. They are often warlocks bound to the Kraken via a pact of the deep, or wizards who have been promised arcane secrets from the ruins of sunken Netheril. They know the master's name. They bear the tattoo of the purple squid, often hidden on the tongue or the sole of the foot. And at the very top there are the chosen. These are the individuals who have communed directly with Slarkretel. The reach of this society is terrifying. They have infiltrated the Lord's Alliance. They have spies within the Harpers. They have manipulated the politics of Yata, Luskan, and Baldur's Gate. One of the most chilling examples of their influence can be found in the Storm King's Thunder storyline. Here, we see the Kraken Society operating at its peak. They did not just rob a bank, they kidnapped a king. Slarkretel orchestrated the abduction of King Hekaton, the ruler of the Storm Giants. Think about the scale of that ambition. To kidnap the most powerful giant on the planet, to hold him in stasis, and to use his absence to throw the entire ordning, the giant social structure, into chaos. Why? Because chaos breeds opportunity. With the giants fighting each other, the small folk of the coast were defenseless. The seas became wild, and in that fear, Slakrethel's power grew. The society operated out of a riverboat casino called the Grand Dame in the city of Yata. The owner, Lord Casper Dryland, was a high-ranking member of the society. He was a nobleman, a man of wealth and taste, who secretly bowed to a squid. This is the horror of the Kraken Society. It is sophisticated. It is not a cult of raving lunatics in wet caves. It is a cult of silk robes and fine wine. It is a cult that buys you a drink and asks you about your day, all while calculating exactly how to leverage your secrets for the master. Nishesh. But to truly understand the devotion Slakrethel commands, we must travel to the Purple Rocks. Located far to the west in the trackless sea, the Purple Rocks are a cluster of islands that appear on most nautical charts as a place to avoid. They are named for the strange, violet hue of the stone cliffs that rise sharply from the churning grey water. There are two main islands, Utharal and Trisk. If you were to sail to the Purple Rocks, you would find a community that seems, at first glance, peaceful. The people are fishermen. They are quiet, industrious, and surprisingly welcoming to strangers. There is no crime. There is no poverty. Everyone is fed. But if you stay until sunset, you begin to notice the wrongness. Kill. You notice that there are no elderly people. You notice that the eyes of the villagers are wide, unblinking, and set just a little too far apart. You notice that when the rain falls, they do not seek shelter. They turn their faces to the sky and smile. This is a breeding colony. For centuries, the people of the Purple Rocks have lived under a pact with Slakrethel. They worship him not as a monster, but as a protector. They believe that he shields them from the wrath of the sea, and in exchange, they give him their children. This is the ritual of the giving. When a child is born on the Purple Rocks, the elders inspect it. If the child is perfect, strong, healthy, and bearing the subtle physical traits of the lineage, they are kept. But if the child is favored, or if the population has grown too large, the child is taken to the cliffs. They are thrown into the sea, but they do not drown. Lore tells us that the currents around the Purple Rocks are not natural. They are tentacles of water controlled by Slakrethel. The infants are caught, cradled, and carried down into the deep. There, in the darkness of Slakrethel's lair, they are changed. They are subjected to the energies of the Kraken. Infused with the magic of the deep, they are raised by the sea itself. Some of them become deep scions, spies who can return to the surface. But others become something else. They become the Thrune. The Thrune are the elite guards of the Purple Rocks, rarely seen by outsiders. They are hulking, misshapen humanoids, their flesh turned to a purple rocky hide, their arms elongated and powerful. They are the children who are thrown into the sea, returned to protect the parents who sacrificed them. The villages of the Purple Rocks are terrifying because they are happy. They do not see themselves as victims. They believe they are the chosen people of a living God. They look at the soft, weak people of the mainland with pity. Slakrethel uses the Purple Rocks as a recruitment center and a safe haven. If a Kraken Society spy is burned in Waterdeep, they flee to the Purple Rocks. There, no navy dares to follow. The waters around the islands are patrolled by Slakrethel's children. lesser krakens, giant squids, and awakened whales. The psychological control loreDND exerts over his followers is absolute. He possesses a unique psionic ability, often referred to as the mind of the deep. He can mentally communicate with any of his high-ranking followers, regardless of distance, as long as they are on the same plane of existence. But it is not just communication, it is surveillance. A member of the Kraken Society knows that loreDND is always listening. If they even think about betrayal, he knows. There is a specific, gruesome punishment for traitors. It is called the wet rot. If a member of the society fails the Kraken, or attempts to leave, they begin to cough. They cough up water. Their lungs slowly fill with seawater. Even if they are miles inland, they effectively drown on dry land. Their bodies bloating and dissolving into a puddle of ink and slime. This creates a culture of absolute terror and obedience. loreDND's ambitions are not limited to the physical world. He is deeply involved in the magical weave. He seeks to uncover the secrets of the mythal. Mythals are ancient elven high magic fields that protect cities or alter the laws of physics within a region. loreDND desires to create a Kraken mythal. He wants to weave a spell over the trackless sea that would make it permanently part of his domain, a zone where he is omnipotent, where the weather obeys his mood, and where no ship can sail without his permission. He collects magical items. The Kraken Society is constantly hunting for artifacts. They raid wizard towers, they bid on black market auctions, and they loot shipwrecks. loreDND is building a hoard not of gold, but of arcane power. He creates magical rings and staffs, which he gifts to his lieutenants. These items grant power, but they also act as listening devices and control collars. One of his greatest rivalries is with the Lord of the Depths, the demon lord Dagon. Dagon rules the 89th layer of the Abyss, a realm of shadow and sea. Dagon and loreDND are competitors for the souls of the desperate. They both court the worship of the Quoto and the Sahagin. This abyssal rivalry adds another layer to the danger loreDND poses. He is not just fighting mortals, he is fighting demons, and he is winning. In recent years, following the events of the Second Sundering and the reordering of the Pantheon, loreDND has become more aggressive. He senses that the position of God of the Sea is vulnerable. Umbali is chaotic and reviled. Valkor is weak. loreDND offers a new kind of order, the tyranny of the deep. He offers a world where the ocean is not a chaotic force, but a disciplined empire. He appeals to the lawful evil alignment. He says, "Serve me, and the storm will pass over you. Serve me, and you will be rich. Serve me, and you will survive the coming flood." It is a seductive promise. It is a seductive promise. The Kraken Society's symbol, the purple squid with tentacles extending upward, is starting to appear more frequently. You might see it graffitied on a warehouse in Baldur's Gate. You might see it on a wax seal of a letter on a noble's desk in Neverwinter. You might see it carved into the hull of a ship that arrives in port, with no crew, laden with gold. Ishtarkes siegen sechstel, said. It is a sign that the king of the trackless sea is stretching his arms. And while loreDND is the most famous, he is not the only one. The multiverse is vast, and the oceans of other worlds hold their own titans. Each one is a unique nightmare, a variation on the theme of aquatic dominance. We must broaden our scope now. We must look beyond Toril. We must look to the worlds of Theros and Exandria. We must look at the Krakens that have been chained by gods, and the Krakens that have broken those chains. We are going to speak of the legendary Krakens of the multiverse. We are going to speak of Tromokratis and Ukeotoa. The ocean is not the same everywhere. The water that laps against the docks of Waterdeep is salty and cold, smelling of iron and fish. But if you were to step across the veil of reality, if you were to walk the plains to the world of Theros, or sail the Lucidian Ocean of Exandria, you would find that the water tastes different. It tastes of magic. It tastes of destiny. And in these other oceans, there are other kings. Whilst loreDND is a schemer, a wizard king who wants to rule from the shadows, the Krakens of other worlds are different. They are often weapons of the gods, or mistakes left behind by creators who did not understand what they were making. What? Let us travel first to the realm of Theros. This is a world defined by belief, where the stars are the canvas of the gods and myths walk the earth. Here, the ocean is the domain of Thassa, the god of the sea, and her greatest pet, her ultimate sanction, is Tromokratis. Tromokratis is not merely a kraken. He is a living natural disaster that has been given a name. In the lore of Theros, he is known as the Polis Breaker. Imagine a creature so heavily armored that conventional weapons shatter upon impact. Tromokratis is distinct from other krakens. Because of his carapace, he is covered in plates of calcified magic, harder than adamant, that have withstood the tridents of other gods. The legend of Tromokratis is terrifying because of his invulnerability. He is not just a sack of hit points to be whittled down. He is a puzzle. Lore states that Tromokratis cannot be harmed by any spell or blade as long as his hearts are beating. And he does not have just one heart. He has 4. These hearts are not located in his chest. Protected by ribs, they are spread across his massive body, hidden under the thickest plates of his armor. To kill Tromokratis, a hero cannot just strike him. They must climb him. They must scale the living mountain of his flesh while he thrashes in the turbulent sea. They must find the weak points in the armor, the cracks where the purple light of his biology shines through. And they must carve their way in to destroy the hearts, one by one. Until the hearts are stopped, Tromokratis is effectively immortal. He ignores the might of armies. He ignores the fire of dragons. He simply moves forward, crashing through the sea walls of the human polis cities, dragging entire civilizations into the water. He is a creature of simple, brutal purpose. loreDND wants to rule you. Tromokratis wants to erase you because his mistress Thassa is displeased. He is the divine eraser. Now, let us shift our gaze. Let us travel through the phlogiston, across the crystal spheres, to the world of Exandria. Here, in the warm tropical waters of the Menagerie Coast, there is a name that is whispered by sailors, pirates and warlocks, a name that sounds like a bubble bursting in a drowning throat. Ukeotoa. Hinde wachande. Ukeotoa. Hishai. E. Gipcha. Unlike the natural-born Krakens or the elemental titans, Uk'otoa is a created horror. He is a legacy of the calamity, the great war between the prime deities and the betrayer god. He was created by Zahir, the cloaked serpent, the god of poisons and assassins. Zahir wanted a guardian for the seas, a creature that could swallow the navies of the good gods. And so, he forged Uk'otoa. Uk'otoa is often described as a Leviathan-Kraken hybrid. He is serpentine, miles long, with a massive toothy maw and rows of terrifying yellow eyes running down the length of his body. He does not just have tentacles. He has a multitude of grasping arms and fins. But Uk'otoa was too hungry. He was too ambitious. After the calamity, when the gods were sealed away behind the divine gate, Uk'otoa remained. Without his master Zahir to hold the leash, he began to consume everything. He didn't just want to rule the ocean. He wanted to eat the competition. This hubris led to his downfall. The followers of Zahir and the other powers of the world united to seal him away. Uk'otoa is currently bound beneath the bedrock of the Lucidian Ocean. But he is not asleep. Oh, this is the most unique aspect of his lore. The Pact of the Sealed. Uk'otoa cannot move, but he can reach out. He acts as a patron for warlocks. He invades the dreams of drowning sailors, much like an Aboleth, but with a different flavor. The Aboleth offers you a place in the empire. Uk'otoa offers you power in exchange for a key, and the keys to Uk'otoa's prison are the cloven crystals. These are magical orbs, amber-colored and glowing, that act as the locks on his chains. He seeks agents to find these crystals and plug them into the ancient temples hidden across the islands of the coast. When a warlock serves Uk'otoa, they are granted control over water and wind, but they are also plagued by the endless hunger Uk'otoa desires to consume. His followers often feel a phantom sensation of water filling their lungs. They dream of a giant, unblinking yellow eye staring at them from the dark. The catchphrase associated with him, Uk'otoa, repeated in a rhythmic, whispered chant, is a form of viral neuro-linguistic programming. It is a heartbeat. To hear it is to know that he is watching. Uk'otoa represents the Kraken as a prisoner. He is a god in a cage, shaking the bars, promising the world to anyone foolish enough to hand him the key. His story is a warning. Even the greatest monsters can be bound, but their ambition cannot be stifled. Leaving the planets behind entirely, we must now look to the void. We must discuss the celestial Krakens, or astral Krakens. In the Spelljammer settings and the lore of the astral plane, the environment changes, and so does the predator. Space is an ocean. It has currents, it has islands, asteroids, and it has monsters. An astral Kraken is a creature of cosmic horror. It does not swim in water. It swims in the starlight. It feeds on the psychic energies of travelers and the raw matter of nebulas. These creatures are often titanic, even by Kraken standards. Their tentacles are miles long, trailing behind them like the tails of comets. They are bioluminescent, glowing with colors that the human eye cannot process, shifting hues of ultraviolet and deep infrared. And the most terrifying ability of an astral Kraken is its gravity well. It can generate a localized gravitational field. It does not need to grapple a ship physically. It can simply open its maw and inhale. The gravity shifts. The ship begins to fall toward the Kraken's mouth. Crew members are lifted off the deck, screaming as they float helplessly into the void, drawn into the beak. These Krakens are often associated with the death of stars. Lore suggests that they lay their eggs in the cores of dying suns. When the star goes supernova, the energy incubates the eggs, and the hatchlings ride the shock wave out into the universe. And they are the ultimate scavengers of the cosmos. They eat spell-jamming helms. They eat the dreams of astral travelers. They are the reason why experienced spacefarers stick to the phlogiston flow and never, ever stop in the dark patches between the spheres. We should also briefly mention the Simic Kraken of Ravnica. On the city plane of Ravnica, the Simic Combine is a guild of biomancers, scientists who accelerate evolution. They looked at the concept of the Kraken and thought, we can improve this. The Simic Kraken is a biological experiment gone right or wrong, depending on your view. It is designed with specialized adaptations, a carapace that reflects magic, ink that acts as a mutagen, and tentacles that can phase through solid matter. It represents the Kraken as a product of science, rather than myth. It is not a legendary creature born of the gods. It is a weapon grown in a vat to protect the zoning laws of an underwater district. It lacks the ego of Slarkrethel or the malice of Ukatoa, but it possesses a terrifying, calculated efficiency. And, finally, we must touch upon the Shadow Kraken. In the Shadowfell, the plane of gloom and despair, there are dark reflections of the material plane's oceans. Here, the water is black oil. It is cold enough to freeze the soul. The Shadow Kraken is a creature of pure negative energy. It is made of shadow stuff and rot. When it touches you, it does not just crush your bones. It drains your strength. It saps your will to live. Legends say that Shadow Krakens are the ghosts of Krakens that died on the material plane. Their spirits refusing to pass on, twisting into something necrotic. They haunt the dark lakes of the Shadowfell, hunting the Shadowkai and the sorrows worn. These variations, the indestructible Tromokratis, the imprisoned Ukeotoa, the cosmic astral Kraken, the engineered Simic Kraken, and the necrotic Shadow Kraken, prove that the form of the great tentacled Titan is a constant across the multiverse. It seems that no matter where you go, no matter which plane you visit, there is always something massive waiting in the deep. There is always a hunger that cannot be satiated. But how do these titans relate to the other masters of the deep? We have established the Aboleths and the Krakens as the two superpowers. But what happens when they meet? Do they fight? Do they trade? Do they ignore each other? The answer, as with all things in the deep lore, is a complex web of treaties, betrayals, and psychic warfare. We are going to look at the geopolitics of the abyss. We are going to look at the war of the deep. We have spent a great deal of time examining these two superpowers in isolation. We have studied the cerebral, slimy tyranny of the Aboleths, and we have stood in awe of the physical, elemental majesty of the Krakens. But the ocean, vast as it is not infinite. Resources are finite, territory is finite, and the ego of a god-complex monster is infinite. Eventually, the boundaries cross. Eventually, the slime meets the storm. We are now drifting into the most dangerous waters of all, the War of the Deep. This is the geopolitical conflict of the abyss. It is a war that has been waged for thousands of years in the crushing dark, entirely unknown to the historians of the surface world. When a tsunami strikes a coastal city, the survivors mourn the natural disaster. They do not realize that the wave was merely the shockwave of a battle fought 5 miles down, between a savant and a titan. To understand this conflict, we must first understand the incompatible ideologies. So, the Aboleth seeks domination. It wants a structured, static hierarchy where every living thing is a cog in its memory machine. It wants the world to be quiet, orderly, and enslaved. The Kraken seeks devastation and adoration. It is a creature of the primordials. It thrives on chaos, on the fury of the storm. It does not want to micromanage the minds of a million slaves. It wants to be worshipped as a god of destruction. These two worldviews cannot coexist peacefully. The Aboleth looks at the Kraken and sees a dangerous, chaotic variable, a sledgehammer that threatens the delicate glasshouse of its schemes. The Kraken looks at the Aboleth and sees a parasite, a weak, fleshy worm that dares to act superior to the true lord of the ocean. So, how do they fight? It is rarely a direct physical confrontation. A physical fight between an Aboleth and a Kraken is a mismatch. An adult Kraken is gargantuan. An Aboleth is large or huge, if ancient, in a wrestling match. The Kraken simply tears the Aboleth apart. The Kraken's beak can shear through the Aboleth's rubbery hide in a single bite. Therefore, the Aboleths never fight fair. They fight a cold war. The primary weapon of the Aboleth against the Kraken is resource denial. Krakens are biological engines that require immense amounts of food. An active Kraken needs to consume whales, sharks, and entire schools of tuna daily. The Aboleths know this, using their domination powers. Aboleths will often enslave the migration patterns of sea life. They will divert the whales away from the Kraken's trench. They will force the sharks to swim into toxic vents. They starve the Titan. When the Kraken grows weak and hungry, the Aboleths strike. But they do not strike with their bodies, they strike with glyphs. Lore speaks of glyph mines. The Abolethic Sovereignty will dispatch teams of deep scions and chul to the perimeter of a Kraken's territory. They will spend weeks inscribing invisible glyphs of warding on the canyon walls and the ocean floor. These glyphs are loaded with psychic scream spells or banishment magic. When the Kraken leaves its lair to hunt, it swims through a minefield. The water explodes with psychic energy. The Kraken is not killed, but it is stunned. It is hurt. It learns that to leave its home is to suffer. This is a strategy of containment. The Aboleths try to keep the Krakens penned in, effectively placing them under house arrest. But the Kraken is not a helpless beast. It retaliates with environmental warfare. The Aboleth needs specific conditions for its cities. It needs calm water to grow its mucus structures. It needs a stable temperature. The Kraken controls the weather. A kraken can park itself 10 miles away from an aboleth city and simply begin to churn. It creates underwater currents that act like sandblasters. It raises the temperature of the water until the coral dies and the aboleth's mucus boils off its skin. It calls down lightning that strikes the surface of the ocean so hard the discharge travels down to the deeps, electrifying the water for miles. Stability. Imagine living in a city where the ground never stops shaking and the air is constantly electrified. That is what a kraken does to an aboleth city. It makes life unbearable. There is also the proxy war. The aboleths have their scum and chul. The krakens have their water elementals and cultists. In the sunken ruins and the continental shelves, these armies clash. It is a horrific sight. You have the rigid, silent, coordinated phalanxes of the chul, marching in perfect lockstep, guided by the hive mind, and crashing against them. You have the chaotic, swirling masses of water, elementals and frothing-mouthed merfolk cultists, driven by the bloodlust of the kraken. The chul are designed to hunt magic, so they are effective against the kraken's cultist wizards. But they struggle against the raw force of an elemental. A water elemental can simply flow inside a chul's shell and drown it from the inside. The most terrifying aspect of this war is the psionic versus primal dynamic. Aboleths are masters of the mind. They try to enslave the kraken, but enslaving a kraken is incredibly difficult. The kraken's mind is a storm. It is chaotic and vast. Trying to dominate a kraken is like trying to hold a hurricane in a bottle. The feedback alone can burn out an aboleth's brain. However, aboleths are patient. They target the kraken's dreams. When a kraken sleeps, which it does for decades, the aboleths gather. They form a psionic circle. They project a constant, low-level hum of nightmare into the sleeping titan's mind. They whisper paranoia. They whisper that the kraken's allies are betraying it. They whisper that the surface dwellers are coming to kill it. They try to steer the sleeping weapon. If they can convince the kraken in its dream that the coastal city of Waterdeep is an enemy, the kraken will wake up and destroy Waterdeep. The aboleths use the kraken as a loaded gun. They don't pull the trigger. They just point the gun and whisper, "Fire." But what happens when the stalemate breaks? What happens when they actually meet face to face? We have accounts from the Sea of Fallen Stars of such battles. The water turns black with ink and green with slime. The pressure waves shatter the eardrums of any creature within 50 miles. The kraken uses its ink cloud not just to hide, but to blind the aboleth's 3 eyes. The ink, toxic and chemically complex, burns the aboleth's sensitive skin. The aboleth counters with phantasmal force. It creates illusions of the kraken's greatest fears, perhaps an even larger predator or the return of the primordials. But ultimately, in a one-on-one fight, the kraken wins. The aboleth knows this. That is why the aboleth's ultimate defense is its immortality. If a kraken kills an aboleth, the aboleth's body dies. But the aboleth remembers. It reforms in the elemental plane of water, and it holds a grudge. A kraken might kill an aboleth, but that aboleth will spend the next 500 years breeding a specific strain of parasite designed to infect that specific kraken's gills. The aboleth plays the long game. The kraken wins the battle. The Aboleth plans to win the geologic era. However, there is a scenario far more terrifying than their war. There is the Alliance. It is rare, it is almost blasphemous, but it has happened. Sometimes, a threat arises that is so great, or a prize is offered that is so tempting, that the Aboleth and the Kraken set aside their hatred. Usually this involves the gods. Both factions hate the gods. The Aboleths remember the divine betrayal. The Krakens remember being abandoned by the primordials and hunted by the gods. If a powerful artifact of the gods is discovered, a staff of the Magi, a book of exalted deeds, the Aboleth might approach the Kraken. "Lend me your strength," the Aboleth says, "and I will use my knowledge to break the warding seals." "Break the seals," the Kraken replies, "and I will let you live." In these moments, we see the symbiosis of doom. Oh, nanachikar, abdatalkfe. Imagine a Kraken, gargantuan and unstoppable. Now imagine that riding atop its head, clinging to its barnacled ridges, are three Aboleth savants. The Kraken provides the physical invulnerability and the storm. The Aboleths provide the magical shielding and the psionic artillery. The Aboleths weave counterspells to stop the heroes from hurting the Kraken. They cast haste on the Titan, making it move with blurring speed. They use their telepathy to coordinate the Kraken's attacks, removing the chaotic element and replacing it with cold, tactical precision. A hasted, tactically controlled, magic-resistant Kraken is essentially an apocalypse event. Fortunately for the multiverse, these alliances are fragile. The Aboleth inevitably tries to betray the Kraken, usually by trying to enslave it, once it is weakened from the fight. The Kraken inevitably tries to eat the Aboleth because it is hungry and the Aboleth looks like a snack. They turn on each other before the victory is complete. There is one final aspect of their interaction: the food chain of knowledge. Krakens hoard physical secrets. Sunken ships, lost cities. Aboleths hoard mental secrets, spells, memories. Sometimes they trade. A Kraken might capture a high-level wizard. It doesn't care about the wizard's spellbook, but it knows the Aboleth does. The Kraken will summon an Aboleth. "I have a mind full of tasty 9th-level spells," the Kraken communicates. "I will give you this wizard. In exchange, you will tell me where the Sea Elves have moved their capital." It is a transaction of flesh for data. This trade network suggests that there is a language of the deep, a dialect of Aquan, or deep speech, that is reserved for the Alphas. It is a language of thrums, bioluminescent flashes, and pressure waves. In the deepest trenches, like the trench of Lopak in the Forgotten Realms, the hierarchy is fluid. At 10,000 feet, the Abolethic Sovereignty rules. Their cities cling to the walls of the trench. They control the water column. At 20,000 feet, the Krakens rule. They lay on the bottom, in the silt, surrounded by the bones of the world. The Aboleths stay above. The Krakens stay below. It is an uneasy neighbor's truce. The Aboleths don't swim down because they don't want to be eaten. The Krakens don't swim up because they are lazy, and prefer to let the food fall to them. But recently, the law suggests a disturbance. How? With the rise of entities like Sla Krethel, who are gaining class levels in Wizard. The balance is shifting. A Kraken that can cast spells does not need an Aboleth. A Kraken that can dominate person effectively replaces the Aboleth's primary utility. The Aboleths are afraid. For the first time since the arrival of the gods, they are afraid of something native to their own plane. They see the Krakens evolving. They see them becoming not just titans of muscle, but titans of mind. And an Aboleth knows that there is only room for one supreme intellect in the ocean. How? This fear is driving the Aboleths to desperate measures. They are reaching out to the far realm more frequently. They are experimenting with darker, more volatile mutations. They are willing to break reality to stop the Krakens from surpassing them. And the Krakens, they feel the fear, and they enjoy it. This war, hidden beneath the waves, is the engine that drives much of the aquatic peril in a Dungeons and Dragons campaign. If the Sahuagin are raiding a coastal village, it might be because the Kraken pushed them out of their territory. If a sudden plague of madness strikes a port town, it might be the psychic fallout of an Aboleth weapon detonated deep offshore. The ocean is not peaceful. It is a battlefield. And you, the adventurer, floating on your little wooden boat on the surface, you are merely walking across the roof of a burning building. As we approach the end of our dive, we must look at the ultimate source of this horror. We have talked about the creatures, their wars, and their slaves. But where does the madness truly come from? We must return to the beginning, to the hole in the universe, to the place where physics goes to die. We are going to discuss the far realm connection and conclude our journey into the black. We have reached the bottom. Ow, and deal. Ow. We have descended past the coral reefs of the surface, past the twilight zone, where the whales sing, past the midnight trenches where the Aboleths dream, and even past the abyssal plains where the Krakens sleep. We are now standing at the very edge of reality. To truly understand the horror of the deepest oceans, we must acknowledge that the ocean is not just a body of water. In Dungeons and Dragons cosmology, the deep ocean is often treated as a soft place in the boundaries of the worlds. It is a threshold, and what lies on the other side of that threshold is not another continent or another plane of existence like the Feywild. It is the far realm. It is the far realm. Throughout this journey, we have touched upon the madness of the Aboleths. We have described their memories as alien and their architecture as non-Euclidean. But these are just words until you stare into the source. The far realm is the outside. It is the place beyond the great wheel of cosmology. It is a reality where the laws of physics, time, and logic do not apply. It is a realm of infinite layers, filled with geometries that hurt the human eye to look at. The Aboleths are the ambassadors of this realm. Endel, Dahol, Iji. While creatures like mind flayers, illithids are time travelers who have been mutated by the far realm, the Aboleths are its blood. Remember Pisceith's, the Blood Queen? She is a traveler from this void. This connection explains why the Aboleths are so fundamentally incompatible with the gods. The gods are beings of the material plane and the outer planes, places defined by rules, belief, and structure. The Aboleths are beings of a reality where rules are fluid. Oh, this is the root of the madness. When an adventurer faces an Aboleth or stares into the eye of a Kraken that has touched the void, they are not just frightened, they are subjected to a collision of realities. The humanoid brain is designed to understand cause and effect. Up is up, down is down. Time moves forward. The Aboleth mind exists in all times, simultaneously due to their eternal memory. They do not see you as a person standing in front of them. They see your ancestors, your potential descendants, and your rotting corpse all at once. When they project this perspective into your mind via telepathy, your brain snaps. It cannot hold the data. This is why interaction with these beings often calls for sanity checks in the game mechanics. It is not about being scared. It is about your neurons misfiring because they are trying to process a fifth-dimensional concept with third-dimensional hardware. And the ocean acts as a lens for this madness. Water as a conductor. It conducts electricity, yes, but in D&D lore, it also conducts psychic energy. A thought projected in the air dissipates. A thought projected in the deep ocean travels for miles, undiluted. This is why the deepest oceans are the storage locker for the multiverse's nightmares. When the gods have a mistake they want to hide, like Ukatawa or the imprisoned princes of elemental evil, they sink it. They assume the water will wash it away. But the Aboleths are down there. They find these mistakes. They study them. The current trajectory of the lore suggests a terrifying endgame. The Aboleths are no longer content with merely waiting. They are actively trying to erode the barrier between the material plane and the far realm. Or they are building planar breaches. We see hints of this in the Ghosts of Saltmarsh and the Princes of the Apocalypse storylines. The cults of the deep are not just summoning monsters, they are performing rituals to thin the water. They want to turn the ocean into a portal. If they succeed, the result is the Abolethic Sovereignty's vision. A world where the sky is replaced by the violet, swirling madness of the far realm. A world where gravity is optional. A world where every living being is mutated into a form that can survive in the void. In this scenario, the Aboleths are the gods. They are the only ones who can navigate the chaos. We, the mortals, would be reduced to sanity-blasted thralls, floating in the drift, grateful for the Master's guidance, because the alternative is staring into the infinity of the outside. Anxiety. On the other hand, we have the Kraken's vision. The Kraken does not want the far realm. The Kraken likes the material plane. It just wants to own it. If the Krakens win the War of the Deep, the result is a water world. They will melt the ice caps. They will call down storms that never end until the continents are eroded down to sandbars. Civilization would end. There would be no libraries, no forges, no farms. There would only be the hunt. Humanity would devolve. We would become like the Quoto or the Sahuagin. Feral, aquatic scavengers, fighting over scraps in the ruins of our flooded cities. It is a choice between the asylum and the slaughterhouse. Hideo, Oishi. The Aboleth wants to break your mind. The Kraken wants to break your bones. And between these two titans, the surface world is blissfully unaware. We worry about taxes. We worry about goblin raids. We worry about the dragon in the mountain. We rarely look down. But perhaps we should, because the lore tells us that the oceans are rising. The frequency of Kraken attacks is increasing. The Aboleths are moving their cities closer to the surface. The deep is coming to us. Why? And Cow. Cow was sailor. And do cow. But let us step back. Let us take a breath. You are safe here. You are not in the trench. You are not drifting in the void. You are warm, dry, and the only pressure you feel is the weight of the blanket or the chair beneath you. We have traveled a long way tonight. We have seen the birth of the blood monsters in the primordial soup. We have walked the mucus-slick streets of Golismolga. We have felt the static charge of the Kraken's storm. We have peered into the eyes of Slakratel and seen the hunger of a god wannabe. The lore of the deepest oceans is a reminder that the map is not the territory. The map shows blue space and says water. The territory is a kingdom of monsters that makes the surface look like a nursery. It is a place where memory never dies, where the storm never breaks, where the silence is heavy enough to crush a soul. But for now, we leave them there. We let the water close over their heads. We let the darkness reclaim its secrets. You have the knowledge now. You know what watches from the abyss. And in the world of D&D, knowledge is the only weapon that doesn't rust. Thank you for joining me on this descent. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the blackest waters of the realms, and you want to explore more of the hidden corners of lore, from the frozen hills of Stygia to the radiant clockwork of Mechanus, please consider leaving a like and subscribing to the channel. It helps the signal reach through the noise. Until next time.